Welcome back. Now let's turn to some environmental news. The Leviathan gas rig off the coast of Haifa has been a topic of contention here in Israel. Noble Energy, the firm responsible for the rig, planned a pipe flushing test, which the Environmental Protection Ministry ordered them to postpone amid concerns of dangerous pollution along the coast. And that Noble Energy had failed to meet the criteria for the procedure. Dr. Mike Adel, a physicist and activist with the group Oil&Gas, joins me in studio now. Dr. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Now, first of all, tell me what you feel some of the problems are here with the gas rig.
Well, I would actually like, of all things, to start with a statement by our Energy Minister, Dr. Yuval Steinitz. He asserts that the natural gas revolution will make us an energy superpower and will allow us not only huge revenue for the country, but also a dramatic reduction in air pollution. We're not going to look into the statement about the revenue, but we are going to scrutinise the statement about a dramatic reduction in air pollution.
Because that's not actually the case, is it?
No, we actually think natural gas is a rather dirty business.
And why so?
Let's go back a few years to the implementation of the Tamar gas platform. That was built in 2013. And since that platform was constructed, it's won the dubious honour of the most polluting facility in Israel for three materials, at least in the energy sector. For methane emissions, a greenhouse gas, non-methane volatile organic compounds, and benzene. In the last case, benzene, which is a highly carcinogenic material, it's actually the most polluting facility in all of Israel over all industries.
Now we're talking about the Tamar rig right now, right? Tamar.
That's correct.
Now, I have a response from the Energy Ministry just on that. I'm going to read this out for you now. We asked them about the emissions that the Tamar rig was producing, and they have responded saying, after the application process began for the permit of the Tamar rig, the Ministry examined and found that the emission of non-methane volatile organic compounds from Tamar was higher than those reported. Now, that's by Noble. So what's your response?
That's an understatement. It was higher by a factor of 30 than what they had predicted in their environmental impact assessment. This obviously is something which has diminished our confidence with regard to Leviathan.
We have the graph actually just up on our screen now, which shows how the emissions have actually increased.
Right. So this is the benzene emissions from the whole of the Israel's energy sector. And the interesting thing is that the vast majority of these are coming from that single platform. This is in stark contradiction to the minister's statement. What we should also look at is the methane emissions. Now, methane is not carcinogenic, but it is a very powerful greenhouse gas. In fact, it's 84 times more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. It's a sad statement that these roughly 4,000 tonnes that have been emitted every year by the Tamar gas platform has actually offset all of the goodwill by Israel's citizens who've installed solar panels on the roofs of their houses.
Let's talk about the halting of the Leviathan gas rig, because there was meant to be testing that was going ahead, and that didn't happen. Now, talk to me about why that didn't go ahead.
Well, maybe just the last word on Tamar.
Go for it.
Before I get to that.
That's okay.
The Tamar platform was actually going to be built right in a busy intersection between several towns on the Carmel coast. Right? If that would have happened, then we would have been exposed to that level of gases. I'm sure that the authorities would have said that they would have taken much more care, etc., etc., etc. But you've got to understand, we don't have a high level of confidence as a result of those emissions. Those emissions, whether or not they're inside territorial waters or outside, the environment doesn't watch for the borders of territorial waters. A couple of years ago, when we got wind that another platform was going to be built, and this time much closer to the coast, only 9.5 kilometres from the coast and right opposite the Carmel coast, we obviously were very concerned. And myself and a number of other concerned scientists went to Jerusalem, and we had a meeting with members of the Ministry of the Environment and members of the Ministry of Energy, and we presented to them our concerns. First of all, we showed them the reports that had become available on the Tamar emissions, and second of all, we showed them some data that we had from a rig that was operated by Noble Energy in the Gulf of Mexico. The advantage of the rigs in the Gulf of Mexico is there's much more rigorous monitoring of those platforms. There they have to report what's called event-based reports. And what we observed in that data was that there were these things called cold vents. Okay? And this is very central to the whole issue around Leviathan. Cold vent is basically when the gas is released from the platform into the air without going through the flare. The flare is the most basic element of pollution destruction, right? The flare is the thing that you have to have on a platform in order to prevent the gases from significantly affecting the environment.
So are these cold vents that you're talking about part of the credentials that Noble Energy were meant to have done, part of the quality control, that is why it was halted?
Precisely. Essentially, in the environmental impact assessment, they had not brought this topic up. They had only brought it up at a later phase when they submitted their emission permit request. But even in the emission permit request, they failed to mention that this whole thing would happen over an 8-hour period. They had basically said, look, we're going to emit the same amount that we plan to emit over a year. We're actually going to emit in 8 hours. And we're going to release it in a cold vent, not through the flare.
Okay. Now,
when that happened, the place went ballistic, right? The citizens of our area really, really got active.
Now, we'll talk about the Energy Ministry's response, because they have given us a number of responses. We also, I must mention, reached out to Noble Energy a number of times. We've called them, sent them questions, and they have declined to comment or come join us on this discussion. But earlier in the week, they put out a public statement, and I'll read that to you now. They said that we have waited a long time for the gas to flow from Leviathan, and it will happen soon. The decision of the Environmental Protection Ministry is surprising and regrettable. Noble Energy meticulously complies with all permits and approvals it was granted by the courts. Partners of Leviathan are excited and ready to produce the natural gas and turn Israel into an energy empire. So I would read out what the Environment Ministry said. The Ministry decided not to allow the emissions, and only when the credentials are accepted and validated, they will be allowed to begin. So when they are allowed to begin, what do you suspect will happen?
So we do not have a high degree of confidence that our safety will be safeguarded. And that's based obviously on previous experience. But secondly, subsequent to the first stay that the court put on the continued operation of the commissioning process, 2 more professors who actually are not directly associated with our organisation came out with an independent expert opinion asserting that the only document that had been provided, which was supposed to prove that there is no risk to the coastal residents during these events, that report was basically Swiss cheese. Now, they didn't come and say everybody's going to die. What they said was, when we look at this document, due diligence has not been done. There are a number of fundamental shortcomings in the work that's been done here. Now, we don't know if that's the reason that the Ministry of Environmental Protection put the stay. They make a different statement.
Well, it is a very concerning issue, and I wish we could continue talking about it, but this is all we have time for at the moment. Dr. Adel, thank you so much for joining us.